My name is Molly. I'm 68 years old, and after 40 years as a teacher in Ohio, I thought I understood family dynamics. But last Christmas, when my daughter-in-law, Amanda, screamed that I was a useless old woman in front of everyone, something inside me finally snapped. Years of financial support, babysitting, and emotional care flashed through my mind in an instant. So I stood up and said what I'd been holding back for too long. If you're watching this from a family gathering, give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. You might need these lessons for your next holiday dinner. I've been a widow for 5 years now. My husband John died suddenly from a heart attack while working in the garden. One moment he was planting tomatoes, the next he was gone. The loss left me alone in our modest 3-bedroom home in suburban Columbus, a place filled with 40 years of memories, but suddenly so quiet. Thankfully, I had my son Thomas. He's always been my rock, even as a child. Growing up, he was the thoughtful one who would bring me wildflowers when I was sad, or make handmade cards for no reason at all. Thomas followed his passion for computers into a successful career as a software engineer, and despite his busy schedule, he always made time for his mom. I remember the day he first told me about Amanda. His voice bubbled with excitement over the phone. "Mom, I've met someone amazing. You're going to love her." Thomas had dated here and there, but I'd never heard this particular tone before. He sounded completely smitten. When I first met Amanda at a restaurant downtown, she was undeniably beautiful with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes. She had an engaging laugh and asked thoughtful questions about my teaching career. I was instantly charmed and so happy for Thomas. They seemed to complement each other perfectly. Her outgoing personality balanced his more introverted nature. Their romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, Thomas called to tell me they were engaged. "When you know," he said. And I didn't question it. I was just thrilled that my son had found someone to share his life with. I tried my best to bond with Amanda before the wedding. I invited her shopping shared family recipes, and even suggested we make the wedding favors together. She accepted these overtures politely, but I started noticing little things. Comments about how quaint my home was. Suggestions that I update my outdated wardrobe. Each remark delivered with a smile, but leaving a small sting nonetheless. Just after the wedding, Thomas received a significant promotion that required relocating to Boston. Suddenly, my son was 300 miles away. I tried not to let my disappointment show. This was his opportunity to grow in his career, and I would never stand in the way of that. The distance made staying connected more difficult, especially as Amanda seemed to gatekeep communication with Thomas. Phone calls became less frequent. When I called, she often answered and explained that Thomas was too busy to talk. My weekly Sunday calls with my son dwindled to monthly brief conversations. Despite the growing distance, I remained determined to maintain a relationship with my only child. I joined Facebook to see the photos they shared and learned to text so we could communicate more easily. I made the long drive to Boston several times a year, even though highway driving had always made me nervous. The first significant change in our relationship came about 18 months into their marriage. Thomas called me directly one evening, something that had become increasingly rare. He sounded hesitant, uncomfortable. After some small talk, he finally got to the point. "Mom, Amanda and I found the perfect house, but we're a little short on the down payment. Could you help us out? We need about $30,000. I was shocked by the amount, but didn't show it. The money would come from my retirement savings, carefully built over decades of teaching. But this was my son, and I wanted him to have a good home. "Of course," I said, without hesitation. "I'll transfer the money tomorrow." What I didn't know then was that this would be just the first of many such requests. The pattern established itself slowly, so gradually that I almost didn't notice until it had become routine. 6 months after the house down payment, Amanda called directly this time. They wanted to remodel the kitchen with high-end appliances and imported countertops. Could I help with $15,000? Just a loan, of course, which they would pay back when Thomas received his year-end bonus. That bonus came and went, with no mention of repayment. Instead, a few months later, there was another call. Amanda needed a new car, and they were $10,000 short on the down payment for the luxury SUV she had her heart set on. Again, I transferred the money from my dwindling savings. Then came the request for $8,000 for a vacation to the Amalfi Coast. "Thomas has been working so hard," Amanda explained. "He really needs this break and will pay you back as soon as his stocks vest next quarter." Those stocks vested, but the repayment never materialized. With each request, my retirement fund shrank. I started to worry about my financial future, but pushed those concerns aside. What was money for, if not to help your family? Still, something felt increasingly wrong about the situation. The financial requests weren't the only issue. Amanda's subtle put-downs had become more frequent and less subtle. During my visits to their home, she would make comments about my appearance. "Oh, Molly, that hairstyle really ages you." Or about my cooking. "This is good for homemade, but you should try the gourmet version from the specialty store downtown." Each comment delivered with a tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. What hurt most was watching Thomas's reaction to these interactions. In the early days, he would gently defend me. "Mom's apple pie is the best in the world," he might say. But gradually he became silent during these moments, his eyes focused on his plate, his shoulders tense. He was withdrawing, caught between his wife and his mother, and choosing the path of least resistance. Meanwhile, Amanda's lifestyle became increasingly lavish. Their social media showed exotic vacations, expensive restaurant meals, designer clothes, and costly home renovations. All while the loans to me remained unpaid and new requests continued to arrive. By the 5-year mark of their marriage, I had transferred over $70,000 to them. My comfortable retirement cushion had become a thin mattress of financial insecurity. I started cutting back on my own expenses, turning down the thermostat in winter, canceling my modest vacation plans, and shopping at discount grocery stores. The Thanksgiving before the fateful Christmas was particularly difficult. I had driven to Boston and spent 2 days preparing a traditional meal, including my special pumpkin pie made from an old family recipe. When dessert time came, Amanda took one bite and announced to everyone at the table, "It's a bit bland, isn't it? I should have ordered from that award-winning bakery downtown." Later that same visit, I overheard Amanda on the phone with a friend. She didn't know I was coming back inside from getting something from my car. "No, we can afford it," she was saying with a laugh. "We'll just ask the ATM." There was a pause. "Not that kind of ATM. I mean, my mother-in-law." The casual cruelty of the nickname felt like a physical blow. I stood outside the door, my hand frozen on the handle, torn between confrontation and peacekeeping. In the end, I chose what I had always chosen. I waited a few minutes, then made a show of opening and closing the front door, loudly before entering the room. Amanda had ended her call and smiled at me as if nothing had happened. A week before Christmas, Amanda sent a text about their gift expectations. She included links to specific high-end items she wanted, including a designer handbag that cost more than my monthly pension. I stared at the price tags with growing anxiety, but ultimately charged everything to my credit card. The thought of disappointing Thomas or causing tension during the holidays was worse than the financial strain. Looking back now, I can see I was caught in a cycle of financial and emotional abuse. But at the time, I only knew I loved my son and would do almost anything to keep him in my life. Almost anything. I spent a full week preparing for Christmas at Thomas and Amanda's house. I cleaned my home thoroughly before leaving, not wanting to return to a mess after the holidays. I baked cookies, made my special apple pie, and carefully wrapped all the expensive requested gifts. The credit card bill wouldn't come until January, and I pushed away thoughts of how I would manage it. The 3-hour drive to Boston was treacherous. A winter storm had left the roads slick, and my old sedan struggled in the conditions. Twice I considered turning back, but the thought of missing Christmas with Thomas kept me going. I arrived at their house exhausted, but excited to spend the holiday with my son. Thomas and Amanda's home was in one of Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods, a 4-bedroom colonial with perfect landscaping and a 3-car garage. Even covered in snow, it screamed wealth and status. I parked my salt-stained 10-year-old car between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling immediately out of place. Amanda opened the door when I knocked, her greeting polite but cool. "You're early," she said, though I had arrived exactly at the time they had specified. She was impeccably dressed in a red cashmere sweater that probably cost more than all the clothes I had packed. Thomas appeared behind her, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Mom." He wrapped me in a warm hug that momentarily erased my travel fatigue. "I'm so glad you made it safely. The weather report said the highways were terrible." "Nothing would keep me from spending Christmas with you," I said, meaning every word. As Thomas helped bring in my bags, gifts, and food contributions, Amanda mentioned casually. "My parents arrived yesterday. They're staying in the main guest room, so we've set up the office with the pull-out sofa for you. I hope that's okay." It wasn't really a question. and the office pullout was notoriously uncomfortable. I had spent a nearly sleepless night on it during my last visit, but I smiled and said, "That's perfectly fine." Amanda's parents, Harold and Diane, were intimidating in their perfection. Both tall and fit, dressed in casual but obviously expensive clothes. They greeted me with the practiced cordiality of people who have mastered social niceties without warmth. It was immediately clear where Amanda had learned her behavior. "Molly, so good to see you again," Diane said, air kissing near my cheek. "That drive must have been dreadful in your car." The slight pause spoke volumes. I offered to help with dinner preparations, but Amanda dismissed my offer. "Everything's under control. I have a specific vision for the meal." She gestured to the elaborate table setting visible in the dining room, a showcase of crystal, silver, and fine china that made my contributions seem woefully inadequate. Throughout the afternoon, I noticed how tense Thomas appeared, constantly checking with Amanda before speaking or making decisions. "Is it okay if Mom and I watch the game for a while?" he asked her. "Do you think Mom would like some coffee?" he asked, though I was sitting right there. It was as if he needed her permission for any interaction with me. Around 4 o'clock, the doorbell started ringing regularly as additional guests arrived. Amanda had invited several couples I had never met before. Friends from their country club, she explained briefly during introductions. I recognized no one and soon found myself sitting alone in a corner of the living room, while everyone else chatted comfortably about people and places I didn't know. During a moment alone in the kitchen, I opened the trash to discard an empty water bottle and spotted something familiar. It was the tin of homemade Christmas cookies I had sent the week before, half full and discarded. The cookies I had spent an entire day baking carefully, selecting Thomas's childhood favorites. A small thing, perhaps, but it felt symbolic of how my efforts were valued. Just as dinner preparations were reaching their final stages, Amanda approached me with a seemingly innocent request. "Molly, would you mind picking up the ice cream for dessert? I ordered it from Giacomo's, that gourmet shop across town. They have the most amazing handcrafted gelato that will pair perfectly with dessert." Despite my exhaustion from the long drive, I agreed immediately. Thomas offered to go instead, but Amanda insisted he needed to help her with last-minute preparations. So I headed back out into the cold, navigating unfamiliar streets to find this specific shop that was indeed all the way across town. I couldn't help but wonder if the errand was necessary, or if it was designed to get me out of the house during the final preparations. Either way, I completed the mission carefully, securing the expensive gelato for the return trip. In the chaos of returning with multiple guests now arriving and the house in full pre-dinner bustle, I placed the shopping bag with the ice cream on the hallway table, along with my purse and coat, planning to put it in the freezer once I had taken off my winter gear. Somehow, in the confusion, I never completed that task. The gelato remained forgotten in the hallway as we all moved to the dining room for dinner. Amanda had created a Christmas dinner setting, worthy of a magazine spread. The large dining table gleamed with polished silver crystal glasses and fine china. A centerpiece of white roses, pine boughs, and twinkling lights ran down the middle, and personalized place cards directed everyone to their assigned seats. I noted immediately that I was placed at the far end of the table from Thomas, who was seated next to Amanda at the head. Her parents occupied the honored positions on their other side. The seating arrangement sent a clear message about hierarchy in this household. Throughout the elaborate meal, I tried my best to engage with the guests. Seated near me, a couple who worked with Amanda in real estate. They were polite, but clearly had little interest in speaking with me. Their conversation kept turning to luxury properties, recent sales, and clients I couldn't possibly know. From my position, I could see Thomas, but could barely hear him. Several times, I caught his eye and smiled, receiving a quick smile in return, before Amanda would draw his attention back to her conversation. I felt increasingly invisible as the meal progressed. Amanda, however, found several opportunities to direct attention my way, none of them positive. Molly still lives in the same house she raised Thomas in, she told the table during a lull in conversation. Can you imagine the same kitchen from the 1980s? It's like a time capsule. Everyone chuckled politely, while I forced a smile. When I mentioned a former student who had recently been elected to local office, Amanda cut in. Mom, that story is from before Thomas and I even met. I think everyone wants to hear something a bit more current. The dismissal stung particularly, as several guests had seemed genuinely interested. As the main course dishes were being cleared, Amanda began discussing the dessert plans. I've prepared a special trifle, and we have Molly's apple pie, she said, her tone making clear which she expected people to prefer. And, of course, the artisanal gelato from Giacomo's, for those who want it. There was a moment of expectant silence as everyone looked toward the kitchen. Amanda frowned slightly. Thomas, can you get the gelato from the freezer? Thomas disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later, looking confused. I don't see it in the freezer, he said. Amanda's expression tightened. It has to be there. I sent your mother to pick it up specifically. That's when the realization hit me. The shopping bag in the hallway. In the commotion of arrivals, I had completely forgotten to put the ice cream in the freezer. My stomach dropped as I remembered exactly where I had left it. I'm so sorry, I said, feeling my face flush with embarrassment. I left it in the hallway when I came back. I meant to put it away and then forgot. Amanda's face transformed her polite hostess mask, slipping to reveal the anger beneath. You had one job, Molly, she said, her voice rising sharply. The table fell silent, guests exchanging uncomfortable glances. One simple thing to remember, and you couldn't even do that, right? I started to apologize again, but she continued her words, growing more heated. This is so typical. Do you have any idea how much that gelato cost? How special it was supposed to be? You're such a useless old woman. The words hung in the air, shocking in their naked cruelty. The entire table had gone completely still. Thomas looked horrified, but said nothing, frozen in place. Amanda's parents watched with raised eyebrows, but no particular surprise, as if this behavior was not unexpected. In that suspended moment, something shifted inside me. I saw with sudden clarity the pattern of the past years. The financial requests, the subtle put-downs, the growing isolation from my son. I thought of all the checks written the babysitting, provided the emotional support given. I thought of my dwindling savings and the credit card bill coming in January. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. My voice was calm but clear enough to reach every corner of the suddenly silent room. Then stop calling me when you need money. Thomas's head snapped up, his expression a mix of shock and confusion. Amanda's parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. But it was Amanda's reaction that confirmed I had finally hit a nerve. Her face flushed deep red, and she threw her napkin onto the table. "How dare you?" she nearly shouted. "You want to talk about money? At Christmas dinner, you've ruined everything." She turned to the stunned guests. "You have no idea what we've had to deal with. She's constantly asking us for help, claiming she can't manage her finances. We've given her thousands over the years, and it's never enough." I stood my ground, too stunned by the blatant lie to immediately respond. Amanda's tirade continued, growing more elaborate with each sentence. "Everyone thinks she's this sweet, retired teacher, but she calls us constantly for money. Her house is falling apart because she can't budget properly. We've bailed her out so many times I've lost count." The guests looked deeply uncomfortable, staring at their plates or exchanging awkward glances. But what shocked me most was Thomas's expression. He wasn't embarrassed or angry at my outburst. He looked genuinely confused. "Amanda, what are you talking about?" he asked, his voice cutting through her rant. "Mom has never asked us for money. We've asked her for help several times, but she's never asked us for anything." Amanda turned to him, momentarily thrown off balance. "Thomas, don't be ridiculous. Remember the kitchen repairs, the car trouble, the medical bills." I watched understanding dawn on my son's face. "You told me those were loans to my mother. You said she needed help and was too proud to ask me directly." The room grew impossibly more quiet. Amanda's parents were now watching their daughter with identical frowns. One of the guests murmured something about checking on their babysitter and stood up. Amanda's strategy shifted instantly. "Thomas, your mother is manipulating you. She's always tried to come between us. Those loans were to her. I handled everything because you were so busy with work. She's lying now because she doesn't want to admit she needed our help." I could have shouted or argued, but instead I calmly took out my phone. My hands trembled slightly as I opened my banking app, but my voice was steady. "I have the records of every transfer right here. $73,000 over the past 5 years, all from me to your joint account. The house down payment, the kitchen remodel, the car, the vacation to Italy. Would you like to see the dates and amounts?" Thomas stared at me, then at Amanda, whose face had gone from red to pale. $73,000, he whispered. "Amanda, we never discussed borrowing that much from Mom. You told me it was $30,000 for the house, and that we had paid it back." Amanda's father cleared his throat loudly. "Perhaps this is a conversation best continued in private," he suggested, his authoritative tone breaking the terrible tension. Guests began making hasty excuses and gathering their things. Within minutes, only family remained in the dining room. Amanda's mother was the first to speak once the others had gone. Amanda, is this true? Have you been borrowing money from Molly without discussing it with Thomas? Her tone was cold, more concerned with propriety than the ethics of the situation. Amanda's composure cracked completely. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Thomas works all the time. We have standards to maintain appearances, matter in our circle. His mother has plenty of money, just sitting there, doing nothing. I excused myself quietly and retreated to the office that was serving as my bedroom. I closed the door on the escalating argument and sat on the edge of the pull-out sofa, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The confrontation had drained every ounce of my energy, but underneath the fatigue was a curious feeling of relief. The truth was finally out. There was a soft knock on the door about an hour later. Thomas entered without waiting for my response. His eyes were red, his usual neat appearance disheveled. He sat beside me on the bed, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Mom, I had no idea," he finally said, "about any of it. The money, the way she treated you. Why didn't you tell me?" I took his hand in mine, noticing how much it had changed from the little boy's hand I once held. "Because you love her, and I love you. I didn't want to come between you." "That's not a good enough reason to let someone mistreat you," he said, his voice breaking. "Not even for me." I told him everything then. About the ATM comment, the thrown-away cookies, the subtle put-downs and isolation. And finally, about my nearly depleted savings and the credit card debt I'd accumulated, buying the Christmas gifts Amanda had demanded. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying, each repetition more anguished than the last. "I should have seen it. I should have protected you." From downstairs, we could hear Amanda and her parents arguing loudly. Occasionally, Thomas's name was mentioned, and once I clearly heard my own. The foundation of multiple relationships was cracking under the weight of long-hidden truths. Christmas morning dawned cold and clear, the sunlight reflecting brilliantly off the snow outside. Inside, the atmosphere was frigid in an entirely different way. Amanda had apparently slept in the guest room after hours of argument. Her parents had checked into a hotel, unwilling to remain in the tense household. I had packed my bags, planning to leave immediately after a brief exchange of gifts. Thomas had begged me to stay, but I felt my presence would only exacerbate an already volatile situation. The beautiful Christmas I had imagined seemed irrevocably shattered. We were awkwardly gathered in the living room, mechanically going through the motions of opening presents, when the doorbell rang. Thomas answered it to find Patrick, his childhood best friend, who now lived in Boston. They had made loose plans to meet for a drink later, but Patrick had come early bearing gifts and holiday cheer that felt jarringly out of place. Patrick quickly sensed the tension, but stayed anyway, his easygoing nature providing a buffer that made the morning marginally more bearable. As we sat drinking coffee, he casually mentioned a recent interaction with Amanda. "By the way, I got that check you sent to repay the loan. You really didn't have to pay interest, though. That's what friends are for." Thomas looked up sharply. "What loan?" Patrick glanced between Thomas and Amanda, suddenly uncomfortable. "The $10,000 Amanda borrowed last year. She said you guys were in a tight spot and needed it temporarily." The room went completely still. Amanda stared at her coffee cup, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Thomas's expression hardened into something I had never seen before. "How many others?" he asked quietly. When Amanda didn't respond, his voice rose. "How many other friends and family members have you borrowed money from without telling me?" The confrontation that followed was both terrible and necessary. Amanda finally broke down completely, confessing to a shopping addiction that had spiraled out of control. There were credit cards Thomas didn't know about, loans from multiple friends, and a level of debt that explained the constant need for more money. "I can't stop," she sobbed. "I try, but then I feel this emptiness, and shopping fills it temporarily. Then the guilt comes, and I shop more to feel better." Despite everything she had put me through, I felt an unexpected pang of compassion. The desperate woman before us was not the polished, confident Amanda who had terrorized me for years. She was broken and frightened, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. Her parents returned mid-morning, having been called by Amanda. Their reaction was perhaps the most shocking part of the entire ordeal. Rather than offering support, they responded with disgust and judgment. "We didn't raise you to be this way," her mother said coldly. "This behavior is completely unacceptable. You've embarrassed us thoroughly." They departed again within the hour, leaving Amanda even more distraught. In their absence, a strange, new dynamic emerged. Thomas Patrick and I found ourselves trying to help the woman who had caused so much pain. When Amanda and Thomas went upstairs to continue their discussion privately, I found myself alone with Amanda's purse on the coffee table. Inside, visible without snooping, was a prescription bottle for anxiety medication. It reminded me suddenly of my own mother's struggles decades ago, something I rarely thought about anymore. Later, when I had a moment alone with Amanda, I took a risk and shared that memory. "My mother had similar struggles," I told her. "Not with shopping, but with alcohol. She used it to fill an emptiness too." Amanda looked at me with genuine surprise. "Did she ever get better?" "Yes," I said. "With help, honesty, and time. It wasn't easy, but she became a different person once she faced her demons." It was the first authentic conversation we had ever had. By evening, the three of us sat down for a serious discussion about next steps. Thomas was firm about what needed to happen. They would seek marriage counseling and financial therapy. All debts would be disclosed, and a plan created to repay everyone, starting with me. Amanda resisted initially, especially the part about therapy. "I don't need a psychiatrist," she insisted. "I just need to try harder." "This isn't about trying harder," Thomas said gently but firmly. "This is about getting the right help for an actual condition. And it's non-negotiable if you want our marriage to continue." The word divorce hadn't been explicitly mentioned, but it hung in the air, a possibility that seemed to finally penetrate Amanda's defenses. She agreed tearfully to the conditions. I had planned to leave that evening, but Thomas asked me to stay. "Please, Mom, I know this has been awful, but I need you here. We have a lot of healing to do as a family, and that includes you." Against my better judgment, I agreed to stay through New Year's. It would be the most unusual holiday of my life, but also the beginning of something unexpectedly meaningful. 6 months after that fateful Christmas dinner, I sat in my garden, watching butterflies visit the zinnias. My phone chimed with a text message from Thomas. Payment sent. Check your account. It was the sixth monthly transfer right on the schedule. After returning home in January, I had insisted on a formal repayment plan for the money Amanda had borrowed. Thomas had drawn up a proper agreement, and so far they had been meticulously reliable with the monthly transfers. More important than the financial restitution were the other changes that had blossomed in the aftermath of our confrontation. Thomas had found his voice and begun setting boundaries, not just with Amanda, but in other areas of his life too. He had reduced his work hours and started playing basketball again, something he had loved before his marriage. I had made changes as well. With the regular repayments providing financial stability, I had consulted a financial advisor to rebuild my retirement security. I had joined a book club and a gardening society, developing friendships that reduced my emotional dependency on Thomas. I had even started dating a kind widower who lived in my neighborhood. The most surprising transformation, however, was in Amanda. After initially resisting therapy, she had fully committed to the process. The therapist had diagnosed her with a genuine shopping addiction, fueled by anxiety and deep-seated insecurities. Medication, cognitive behavioral therapy, and regular support group meetings had created noticeable changes. Thomas told me that she had sold many of her designer items to repay debts and had embraced a much simpler lifestyle. Her parents remained judgmental and distant, which was painful for her, but also freed her from trying to meet their impossible standards. Our relationship would never be warm and fuzzy, but something honest had replaced the toxic dynamic of before. Amanda had called me directly several times, awkward conversations at first, but gradually more comfortable. During the most recent call, she had even asked for advice about container gardening, a new hobby she was exploring. The next Christmas was approached with trepidation by all of us. We agreed to a completely different celebration. No elaborate dinner, no expensive gifts, no additional guests. Just the three of us in my home in Ohio, with simple food and modest presents. On Christmas Eve, Amanda handed me a package wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a handmade photo album she had created filled with family pictures from over the years. In the back was an envelope containing a handwritten letter of apology, detailed and specific about the harm she had caused. It was clearly a therapy assignment, but the sincerity felt genuine. The journey had been painful, but the outcome was better than I could have imagined. Thomas and Amanda were building a healthier relationship, based on honesty rather than appearances. Thomas and I had reconnected in a more authentic way, and I had discovered a strength in myself I hadn't known existed. I had learned that family harmony purchased at the expense of my self-worth and financial security wasn't harmony at all. It was exploitation, dressed up as love. Real family support isn't measured in dollar amounts or perfect holiday meals. It's built on respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. My relationship with Thomas transformed into something more equal and adult. He called more often not from obligation, but from genuine desire to connect. When he visited, he came alone sometimes, giving us space to rebuild our bond without interference. The moment when Amanda called me useless turned out to be the most useful wake-up call of my life. It forced me to recognize my own worth and stand up for myself after years of silent acquiescence. It revealed the truth to my son, who had been caught in a web of deception. And ironically, it even helped Amanda by bringing her problems into the light where they could finally be addressed. Sometimes being called useless is exactly what you need to remember your worth. Sometimes a broken holiday is the first step toward authentic healing. I found more peace in that difficult truth than I had in years of seeking approval and avoiding conflict. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was taking advantage of you? What gave you the courage to finally speak up? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening, and remember that true family love always includes respect.